According to a new report by the children's charity Best Beginnings, coronavirus has left many expectant and new parents during lockdown feeling anxious and concerned about their babies and young children. This might be you we're talking about. Many say they feel unable to access the support they need. Let us now speak then to Dr Ranj Singh, who's working with the charity and can tell us more. Hello, Dr Ranj.
Good morning.
With that lovely view behind you, as always.
My roundabout, yeah.
Yeah. So during lockdown, this report said 200,000 babies have been born. That's incredible.
Yeah, so roughly in the UK, about 2,000 babies are born every day. So during the height of lockdown, which is 23rd of March to early July, we think probably around 200,000 babies have been born. And this survey, which was commissioned by Best Beginnings, Home Start UK and the Parent Infant Foundation, wanted to look at how parents of newborn babies or toddlers or expectant parents had been affected by lockdown, because the concern was that, much like other areas of society, there was going to be some sort of detrimental effect, and their findings actually highlight that. Just under 5,500 parents responded across various different backgrounds, and what it showed that although this sector is already chronically underfunded and underserviced anyway, those inequalities and disadvantages got worse during lockdown. 70% of the respondents felt like their parenting ability had been affected. Only a third felt confident accessing mental health support. 70% thought that their baby's behaviour had changed because of lockdown. And even more worryingly, groups that we know are already disadvantaged, like lower income families, young parents, or those from Black, Asian and minority ethnic backgrounds, were even more disadvantaged. So those inequalities were amplified.
And I suppose we've got to worry about a situation where a mum, let's say, already has the beginnings of postnatal depression, but it's all turbocharged by this really unusual situation.
Yeah, I mean, there were various themes that came out of this survey in terms of the kinds of effects that people were experiencing. For example, increased mental health concerns, postnatal depression being a classic example, difficult birth experiences, partners not being allowed to be involved in that birth experience, difficulty accessing breastfeeding support. Now, I work in children's A&E. There is not a shift that goes by where I don't see at least one family with a newborn baby that is having feeding problems. And this is stuff that shouldn't end up in A&E at all. This is something that usually would be dealt with in the community. But however, those services have just been decimated, and we've got to do something about it. And a lot of people will be wondering, well, of course, all services have been decimated. Funding has decreased for a lot of things. What people don't realise is that the first 1,001 days from the point at which you're conceived right up until your second birthday is a crucial window that affects your development and your health and well-being for the rest of your life.
I tell you who's listening very closely is our Ashley here, because this is all relevant. Hopefully we won't be in lockdown when you become a mum.
Although there is obviously constant talk of a second wave, so who knows what the situation will be in January. But I think I've been relatively lucky in that I've got a midwife on WhatsApp. I'm also very able to use tech, and I have access to a computer, which I know a lot of mums won't. So I've actually quite enjoyed doing the kind of more online side of things with the midwife, although she has been allowed to come now. But my main concern is having to give birth, which is obviously a terrifying experience anyway. It'll obviously be my first child, and not having Tommy, my boyfriend, there, because that I think is absolutely terrifying.
Have they not sorted that out now, haven't they?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I work with pregnant couples every week, and we moved the Happy Birth Club antenatal classes online very quickly so we could maintain that support. It wasn't easy, but we had to do it because we knew that these pregnant couples were out there. Suddenly the services, as Dr Ranj said, absolutely, postnatal care is appalling in this country. It's always been the poor relation, and now it is even worse. And we've managed to offer support to these couples, but thank goodness we have, and that's a tiny number compared to who. I took one positive though.
Yeah.
Prem births reduction, a reduction in the number of prem births during lockdown, which is going to make policy making very interesting in terms of maternity leave going forward, because that does seem to indicate that if women are sat at at home with their feet up rather than getting on the tube every day at the latter stages of their pregnancy, there's a positive benefit.
Oh, I didn't realise that might be the reason. Okay. Now, Storm has a couple of questions for you, Dr. Ranj, if you're happy.
Dr. Ranj, we've got some very worried parents online. So Vicky here says, my son has been off school since March. He's suffered with separation anxiety and has become very clingy to me. I'm worried he'll struggle going back to school in September. What can I do?
There'll be a lot of parents in this boat. Anxiety is one of those things that we've seen amplified during lockdown, and that's across the board, children as well as adults. I'm a massive advocate of talking to your children, even about the uncomfortable topics. So if something might feel a bit daunting, make sure you talk to them and make sure you're as honest as possible and find out what his actual concerns are. It could be that he's concerned about going back to school, maybe something really, really trivial or even benign that you could nip in the bud relatively early. I think there's lots of resources out there to help you talk about things like coronavirus. The important thing to point out now is that, firstly, children are at the lowest risk out of everybody, but they still have a part to play in protecting everyone else. And secondly, we're in a very different situation now than when we started off in this pandemic. And then another nice thing might be which I think helps allay anxiety and control it, is maybe do some sort of dummy trips to school together, so that you're not actually going to school, but he's going through the process, and that's getting him used to it till eventually he's ready to go to school. And then you could talk to school about a phased return if things are still really, really tricky.
Oh, I think that's good advice, a little dummy run to school. Another worried mum here, Stevie says, I am a new mum with a 5-month-old. I think I'm suffering from anxiety about my little girl not knowing her grandparents or anyone for that matter. Is my little girl going to suffer from separation anxiety?
Oh gosh, this is the thing about anxiety. It's usually based in some sort of fact, and then it almost becomes out of proportion. So whilst this mum's concerns are completely valid, it may never get to that bad a stage. So separation anxiety is something that most children will go through between the ages of 6 months and a few years. It's a normal stage of development, and we know that they get over it. We know that they go through it and they're okay. So even if it does happen, your child is likely to be all right. We don't know that it's going to be any worse. There's no guarantee because of lockdown, but be reassured that it is something that they will get over. The other point this mum brings up is about contact with other people and family members. Just remember, there are lots of other ways that your little one could experience that contact that may not have to be face to face. So Ashley brought up with connecting with people online, which I think is really, really important. And as lockdown rules are relaxed, you will be able to have more in-person contact. So I would take advantage of that.